I'm delighted to be here, and I want to thank Sid in particular for curating such an interesting and essential conversation at this time. I want to set a little bit of a context, then we're going to go straight into a discussion. And my job is not to give you a speech. It is literally to set a short context so we can hear from this fantastic panel. The panel actually covers some superb areas, as you just heard from Tim. There is defense policy in his experience set. And we also have entrepreneurism and investment. And we have science and technology and how that translates into an impact in the world. The context I'd like to set is the big picture of this present moment, which is an unusual one and a very, very complicated one. So our world and our ability to do the sorts of things that Tim described is founded on us working together in a shared mission to see if we could create peace, prosperity, and freedom in the world. And after a very long time, we're finding that beginning to fracture. And the fracturing of that means that there is not the international cooperation that there used to be, there is not the leadership that there used to be, and so we face a very difficult time to solve what are shared issues in a fragmented world. If I step back even further, what does that actually mean in terms of our ability to invest to make a difference? So there is plenty of money. There's something like $450 trillion of capital in the world. And every year, we're generating almost $100 trillion. Last year was a record for humanity. We generated $110 trillion in 1 year. So there is no shortage of capital. If we take all that money and we say how much of it addresses the UN Sustainable Development Goals, it's $2.5 to $4 trillion. So what is the rest of this money doing? It's doing exactly what it's meant to do. It's the money that is in savings accounts, it's paying credit card bills, it's doing insurance, it is making some investment, of course, to make sure it's safe and it gives a return to the people that want that return who have pensions. So it is doing what it's meant to do. But $2.5 to $4 trillion is not enough annually to address the issues that we have to create a better world. Our estimate is we need something close to $15 trillion to actually address the world's problems. So how will, and this is the subject of this panel, how will the blue economy attract this capital? There was a time, maybe as early as last year sometime, when we felt that actually we could invest for profit at a certain risk to make an impact. And the world seemed to be inexorably moving towards embracing these three dimensions. I have to make money, I have to manage the risk, and I have to make an impact for good. That last one has diminished in importance in a very short space of time, and the requirement is that even if we do good, we know the risk and we make a good profit. What is a good profit? Money is competing all the time for these opportunities. So the ocean will have to compete for opportunities with lots and lots of other parts of the world that are doing things that are far less risky perhaps, far easier to tap into, and perhaps far shorter in timescale. Now, that challenge is the challenge that this panel will begin to discuss to say how do we address that. A 20-second or so reflection. I have no experience in investing in the ocean. I invest in land, and we invest for impact for people who work in the land generally. Force for Good, though, as a whole, recognizes the opportunity for us to address all these issues and believes there are 9 big solution areas which, if we fully went after, we would solve 90% of the Sustainable Development Goal, the goals that we set in 2015. So this is completely doable. There is no new technology breakthrough required to solve 90% of the SDGs. With that in mind, let me turn to each of my panelists. I will ask them each to introduce themselves very briefly and then kick off into a discussion. Tim, you just did a superb introduction of you. But just in case there are new people that joined,
Sure.
would you make a brief introduction, and then you're so well placed to say, what is it that you think government need to do to unlock the opportunity for us to look at the blue economy, create it, and get the returns that we want? What is that role the government can play?
Thanks, Ketan. I appreciate you graciously introducing me. And my name is Tim Gallaudet. Quickly, I served as the NOAA administrator during Trump's first term, and before that, I served as an oceanographer in the Navy for 32 years. And now I'm an ocean tech consultant, very active in this blue economy sector. And that's a big question to ask about what the government can do to move this whole topic forward. And I spent the last 30 minutes addressing that in my thoughts. But in a nutshell, the U.S. government has an agency to do this very task. It's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And I think piling on the accomplishments we made when I was working with NOAA, returning to those would probably be the best approach. And in general, that entails applying science and technology to unlocking the opportunities in ocean investing. I'll keep it at that, and we can go into that more.
Thank you, we will. Sally, would you mind explaining your background too, and then how do you see this being taken forward?
Yeah, so my background most recently has been in the private sector. I started out my career, though, as a research oceanographer with the Naval Research Lab, working quite closely with marine meteorologists on weather forecasting and coupling the ocean and atmosphere components of the Navy's models together for the first time. That became operational for the fleet and showed a lot of benefits to the ocean and atmosphere realm by treating them as a coupled system. This is what I bring to my science now as I've expanded into other realms of the Earth system. First, through being an ocean engineering professor, at the same time running the Department of Homeland Security's Maritime Security Center of Excellence, working closely with FEMA, the Coast Guard, Customs and Border Protection, and others. And then I had a really pivotal experience. After I'd been in academia for a while, I was on sabbatical in the Philippines as a Fulbright visiting professor and saw up close the impacts of climate change there. And that changed me. And I came back and I left academia to help lead a startup in the climate risk analytics space. And this was at a time when that was a very new arena. There was, we were working with AI and software pipelines that were quite new, cloud native, and creating new products much more quickly in order to help businesses, governments understand the risks that were unfolding on an increasingly volatile planet. I left that a couple years ago to come together with a team. We set up a new venture capital fund focused on ocean climate solutions, really to get more capital into this realm of all these exciting opportunities that Tim just did a lovely job of laying out all the sectors of the blue economy, but can also present as a sprawl, right? Like this is one of the, your question about the capital.
And Julie, sorry, I said Sally
yeah,
instead of Julie. My apologies.
You know what?
My apologies.
Every time we get together, people say we're sisters. So Sally and I go back a long way. But yeah, my name is Julie Pullen. But the sort of sprawl of the blue economy also means that when you look up close, it's very hard to see really, really large markets in each of the individual sectors. But in the aggregate, it's trillions of dollars in the blue economy. And I think therein lies the magic of the types of technologies and what can be unlocked now, which is in creating capabilities that can work across the different verticals in the blue economy, from to play a role in defense and national security, but at the same time monitoring, reporting, and verification for ocean carbon removal, for instance. So these sort of versatility of capabilities where you can get traction across a few of the aspects of the blue economy and really grow from there. So almost like so land in an area and then expand into the broader side of the blue economy as those markets grow. And, all indications is the markets are becoming quite quite large, and being able to work across the different realms of them, using technologies that can span, I think is going to be where we're going to see much more of the future. And I can share some more thoughts about the capital needs in general later on.
I'd like to hear that very much. Thank you. Sally. Yeah. Why don't you give us your reflections, and particularly on how it affects communities as we make these changes and we commercialize, and also how, as we see the impact of the environment, how will that affect the communities that are the most vulnerable, least privileged?
Okay. Well, I'm Sally Ann Ranney, and I'm co-founder and president of Global Choices, which is an international, all-women-led organization that is focusing on the Arctic and the Antarctic, particularly now the Arctic, because it is ground zero of climate change. I'm also the president emeritus and co-founder of the American Renewable Energy Institute, and I just became chair of the Conservation Committee for the Explorers Club. I've been involved in conservation for 52 years this year. And really have done nothing else. I was a resource policy analyst for the Wilderness Society. I worked closely with President Carter, who later became a good friend. And I was appointed by President Reagan for a 2-year commission on natural resources and public lands through the Kennedy School at Harvard. My focus has been that the economy is really the wholly owned subsidiary of the environment, because every raw material, even the synthetics we come up with, our water, our food, our air, all our building materials, you name it, it comes from the earth. It comes from Mother Nature. So that's the principle on which the capital is then created. But you don't go into the principle of your investment and start pulling out withdrawing, because what happens then is that your returns go down, 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 because you don't have as much principal invested. So I look at the ocean, and I look at the ice in the Arctic. What is ice worth? What is the sea ice worth? But that's the wrong question. What is the economy without the sea ice? Because the Arctic sea ice is retreating really quickly. It's melting really, really fast. And it's our reflector. It's our heat shield, reflecting the sun's heat and radiation. As that shrinks, all that heat is absorbed by the dark ocean. It raises air temperatures and it raises ocean temperatures. It's changed the jet stream. It's changed ocean currents. Those are fundamental processes that keep life on Earth and the climate stable. And we're fiddling now at a deep, deep level. And so when I think of the blue economy, I can't help but think of the ice economy. And I actually have someone right now is doing an analysis on, as we lose the ice, and we're working with the economist as well, as we lose the ice, what does that mean to the global economy? And it's stunning. Most people don't realize that how many of you saw the movie Don't Look Up? Well, this is like, don't look north. Don't look north. Because so much of what we're, acidification of the ocean, etc., is happening up there because everything is connected to everything. So I have kind of switched, I've gone to the other side of the coin here. And how do we value what is the nature of value? And what is the value of nature? So that's
Interesting point.
That's it in a nutshell.
I'm going to ask you, Tim, to reflect on that, because we don't, in the pricing of an investment, or the valuation of investment, we don't value nature. We just value the other inputs. We assume nature is for free. Now, how do you reflect on what you just heard?
Well, I love that and believe in it and know it. And I thought Sylvia Earle did a great job on the first day when she talked about the value of a whale, opposed to not just catching it and harvesting it, but just being there and contributing to the ecosystem service it provides. But I want to talk a little bit about the ice and the value of ice, because I know about that firsthand. I have surfaced on a Navy submarine through the ice cap in the Arctic, up in the Chukchi Sea.
Oh, yeah.
And just by the way, if you ever go up there and you're in 40-degree below temperatures, don't take off your glove to do a selfie. I did it. Love the picture. My hand almost froze off, and I couldn't get it warm for the whole day. But anyways, I think it's an interesting thing in this discussion on climate, and the narrative is always that it's, okay, there's an alarmist narrative there that it's all negative. And there's a lot of negative. I absolutely appreciate that and know it. However, when I was thinking about the Arctic and I developed the Navy's Arctic Roadmap for the Chief of Naval Operations, I did it twice actually, once as a captain under Admiral Dave Titley when we formed Task Force Climate Change, and then I did it again when I was in charge of that task force. We looked at it geostrategically, and we acknowledged this fact: there are winners and losers. And if you look at Russia has a lot to gain with the retreating ice. The North Sea route is a shipping lane. It's seeing record traffic. China is using it, and they're making gains. They are, look at Siberia. The warming that's occurring, you could have an incredible agriculture production up there. And then there's also, if you look at the coastline of Russia, it looks like an inverted Gulf of Mexico on steroids. There's several river systems that empty up into a continental shelf. So the natural gas opportunities for Russia, the energy opportunities are unbounded. So Russia has a lot to gain in their blue economy from this, but then not so much necessarily us in terms of the impacts in Alaska that are really dramatic. There are national security impacts for us as well, because when I was on that submarine, what I learned is that less ice is not necessarily safer. The ice is moving, it's much more dynamic. It creates these ice ridges that are that move, and it's very difficult to navigate a submarine when you have a shallow continental shelf underneath and all these ice ridges that you want to avoid. So it's just, my point being only is that that it's a multifaceted issue, and I think it's worth appreciating that there are winners and losers.
Before I come to you, Julia, Sally,
Well,
you have an interesting observation on this, right?
Yes, I do. Is that, yes, as Siberia, Russia is 66% permafrost. And permafrost, as it thaws, which it is doing now, emits CO2 and methane, which is not helping our carbon budget on this planet. And if it continues to melt, if we don't get a handle on fossil fuel emissions, if we're going to have an overshoot, there's no question, for a 3 decades. But if we don't level out at 1.5, 1.4, that's going to it's going to continue to thaw anyway. Alaska is 85% permafrost, and Canada is about 47% permafrost. This is a major, major problem. And communities are falling into the ocean for a couple reasons. One, because they're built on permafrost. Number two is the sea ice that used to be there that would buffer the waves and the winds is no longer there. Some communities have completely had to move. Most of them are indigenous. Russia has the longest coastline in the Arctic. And yes, the northern sea route is a toll road for them, for ships. But there is a proposal for a transpolar shipping route across the North Pole. People are going to use that versus the Russian northern, if that happens, which we should put a precautionary pause on some of these things, which I'll talk about in the next session. So yeah, there are winners and there are losers. And in the biodiversity, things are going to shift dramatically. Fisheries are going to shift. More fish are going to come in from the south because the oceans are getting really warm. They need cooler water. And in the Arctic, the Arctic cod, which is one of the biggest fisheries in the North Atlantic, they are ice dependent. They eat the invertebrates on the bottom of the ice. They lay their eggs on the bottom of the ice. Their whole life cycle, they go out, but then they come in, and they're very ice dependent. And so there goes that fishery. If we lose, okay, so what other fisheries come in, but then they're coming from another area where people are really reliant on them. Nothing in nature happens in isolation. Everything is connected to everything. And we have to remember that. We have to start thinking and making decisions around whole systems, understanding how this planet, this incredible, amazing, diverse planet, it's brilliant. We need to understand how it works. And, you know, the saying, Mother Nature always wins. If we don't, she will win.
Sally, I'm going to find a bridge to the next question. And the bridge I'm going to find is if you look at the IPCC report, the long version, the 1,500 pages, whatever it is, I couldn't sleep.
Did you read it?
I did. It's ridiculous.
I couldn't read the whole
It's
thing.
ridiculous for someone like me to read it, but I did. And here's what I learned, that there, and if you couple that with some of the latest announcements of the IPCC, there's a 100% chance, they believe, that we will bridge 2 degrees, and a 90 to 100% chance that we will bridge 2.5 degrees. The consequences of that are in a series of charts all across that report. I wish they would just pick it out and tell us, and so I did that. Right? And here's what you find. It means that food, fisheries, everything that is sustenance will go down in the world because of the heat. Not to say there aren't solutions to that, but in the current scenario, until we translate science and technology into solutions to solve this, that's what happens. Second one is you lose lots of the coastal areas, of course, of the world. So the major cities, without a barrier, would lose most of these major cities. These major cities are, of course, the driver of most of their country's economies. Number 3, agriculture would cross boundaries. Not just state boundaries, but national boundaries too. The global south would become unlivable, and they would have to migrate in large numbers across their own boundaries, perhaps within continent, but also across other boundaries. So the global south would be devastated. But you know what we found is it doesn't take many people to come into a country as a percentage of population to destroy the stability of a country. I come from the UK, and you just need to give it a few million people, and you know we're going to be attacking each other on the streets over this issue. So we are unstable in the north of the world. So the devastation in the south will affect the north. But as all our industries have to move across boundaries, of course we'd be devastated. Now, so that's the negative view. The positive view is you have $433 trillion and $110 trillion. And potentially, if we are flexible, adaptable, then the science can solve this issue in some way. Even if we were getting to 2.5C, you know, the issue is maybe too big for us. But if we could invest to contain it, and if we could invest to find the solutions, and in this EarthX conference, I found so many people have pieces of this answer. And what I wanted to do is ask you, Julie, because you have specialized in taking the science to make it commercial, to figure out how to solve problems at a commercial return. What are the lessons and what are the things that you're most excited about?
Yeah. So I think, so first of all, thank you for that introduction to the setup to this question, because I think that's really important. When we see countries like France release an adaptation plan that imagines a 4 degrees C world by 2100, like that should give us all pause. Like that's a planet that's gone literally off the rails. And, when we back out from that, I think we have to imagine that that shouldn't paralyze us, although we may feel a lot of strong emotions around that. But we should imagine, well, what does the solution space look like so we don't end up in a world like that? Yeah. In a very responsive, proactive way. And when I think about the class of solutions in this arena, I think of the short-term ones. I think of a company called Pole Arctic, which is two Alaskan indigenous women have a company that produces ice forecasts using AI, very innovative, sells to the Navy, very pivotal for navigation, but also for indigenous populations to help them find food, because their livelihoods are at stake right now because the marine mammals they rely on for food are disappearing. I was talking with a woman up in Nutqiavik back in November, and she held my hand and she said, look, the sights, the sounds, the smells that we rely on to find our food, they've all been completely transformed. And Sally has, so many experiences with this because this is what she's devoting her life's work to. So I think about that. I think about like a solution that is solving a problem right now in terms of navigation and helping people find food. And then I think about the longer term class of solutions, which is how do we prevent the loss of sea ice that then propagates into the whole circulatory system of the planet, which is the heat conveyance, the distribution of heat on our planet, which is this exquisite system that also maintains the vitality of all the ecosystems that we rely on that Sally spoke about. And so when you think about those longer range solutions, you really need investors who are in it for 10 plus years. And even investors who may seem to be focused on these longer term solutions may not always have the appetite to go that distance. We were talking about this yesterday. And, for a lot of investors, they really need to see returns on much, much shorter time horizons. And I think that these are conversations we need to be having more out in the open. Like, are you solving for planetary stability? Are you solving for short-term gains? And you can identify as either of those, no judgment. Maybe you're both, but you should be looking for the really big, enduring wins on longer time horizons if you identify as an investor for planetary stability. And you may not get returns in 2-3 years, and you should be okay with that, because the returns will come to your kids and your grandkids because they will have a thriving, habitable planet.
Thank you. Tim, you know this, that government always plays an important role in setting the ground rules of how we operate. And if we look at the magnitude of the challenge, and if you were back in the position you were in NOAA, and you were laying out the map of what you needed the current president to sign for the future, what would you be putting in front of his desk this time?
Great question.
And I want your wife to better take that picture again.
Well, I won't be going back under this president, sorry. But I'm a fan of some of the people he's appointed, like the science advisor, Michael Kratsios. But shortly, and I really want to address investment and what to do with all that capital.
Yes.
If I were back at NOAA, what I would recommend is a couple things. One is partner with the private sector to rapidly expand the current collection capability to monitor the Earth and the ocean. It's happening right now in the private sector with all types of all-domain drones, proliferated low Earth orbit satellite systems, and a wide variety of different, very cost-effective in situ sensors. And then couple that with the rapidly advancing AI-enabled prediction capabilities, both at a weather to climate scale. And those are advancing in the private sector, and NOAA is beginning to partner now. I'd have them partner more. And then also, that's the one, monitor and predict the Earth. The second big area I think that we need to focus is to continue to support the big blue economy, traditional industries, to go more green and sustainable. So shipping. Shipping is continuing to advance alternative fuels like hydrogen and ammonia, as well as wind assist, which is very interesting to me, going back to the age of sail, and same with ports getting more green. And NOAA plays a big role in the data and services to enable that more sustainable big blue economy. And fisheries, in addition, which rely on science and technology to optimize fisheries yield and advance the aquaculture component of it, and then other types of big traditional blue economy industries as well. And then the third big line of effort is, I said this during a previous panel, is NOAA is a conservation agency in addition to a science agency, and I would have the administration advance the philanthropic and private sector contributions of conservation. I said this before, conservation is becoming big business, and companies want to invest in these efforts. And I'm not talking just ESG, really. I'm talking a number of other areas. And I got to point to my partner here, Jim Ritterhoff, the CEO of Forest Blue, a Special Forces Veteran Ocean Conservation nonprofit. We're attracting investors that have big names and deep pockets. So we're talking about Publix, Luminox watches, the NFL, and soon to be the NHL. So those are my kind of three big areas that I would push forward, and I think they all are opportunities to draw a lot of capital to help conserve, understand, and economically grow our ocean. So basically, everything that Sid has been embracing, a healthy ocean and a healthy return on investment.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. We're in the wrap-up, so I want reflections, actually. Sally, is it possible that the problem is not outside, it's inside us, that we are predatory scavengers in some way? We're both, and we're just taking everything we can because there's something inside us that isn't quite right.
Well, I have a couple thoughts on that. One is there's something called hyperbolic discount. And that's when the human brain cannot grasp the magnitude of something, and so it discounts what that might be, which puts us in a position of thinking, particularly with climate change, which is an amorphous phrase. It puts us almost into paralysis, a lot of people. There's 1% of people on the planet that are working feverishly, really working actively on climate change. It went up to maybe about 1.5. And what we're dealing with here really is fossil fuel emissions. We have to admit that. We have to reduce fossil fuel emissions. Well, how do we do that? We're addicted. We really are. I'm addicted. We're all addicted in this room. And it's in our clothes. It's in, it's petrochemicals are everywhere. And we have to reduce those emissions, because all of these fabulous things that Tim has done and is doing, and NOAA is doing, and me looking at the Arctic, and what about communities? We're stuck. We are stuck. So we have to look at ourselves. Yes, there's some brain chemistry involved here. There really is. Because you go to the amygdala, and the amygdala chemically doesn't allow you, when you're in fear, to get to your higher cortex. So the solutions, you get paralyzed. The other thing is that I think humanity in general, we've turned our back on our own true nature. Because our own true nature has a deep knowing, an original knowing, how we should live. with our life support systems, because they truly are our relatives. These other species are our relatives. The water is our ancestor. We came from the water. So there's a respect, there's a reverence. But that doesn't mean you don't use science, it doesn't mean you don't use technology. We have to use those. And they will help us to a great degree. But because there's so many of us on the planet now, those of us that are using the most, this country, Europe, etc., we really do have to look at ourselves and choose differently. There's huge power in choice. We have to make better global choices. That's why my organization is called Global Choices. And we have to make better personal choices. And it's not about denying yourself, it's about choosing. And the other thing is, really quickly, is narrative. Our narrative is, I just want to take pro-life. I'm for pro-life on this planet, you can bet I am. But that narrative got pigeonholed into a very contentious issue. And there are other narratives. It was called global warming until a spin master said, no, use climate change because it's harder to get a handle on. And that narrative, we went with it, but it's very big. Science can pin down global warming. It's hard to pin down climate change as an amorphous. So the internal is the external. Whatever you hold inside is what you express. And collectively, what we're expressing now as the power structure is, it appears, is not supporting getting us to where we need to go on emissions. And my last comment is, think about 3 degrees Celsius. That's 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit. You have 98.7 is your body temperature, add that, and you get 104 degrees plus. And that's where our planet is going, and we still expect her to operate and support us. Not going to happen. So I think we have to flip to the other side of the coin and look at economy from that side as well as the other side.
Sally.
It's about balance.
Sally, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to ask Julie your reflections to close, to help us close. Because we have answers. Tell us what they are.
I come back to the short and the long term, and the ability to stick with solutions that will pan out maybe in 10, 20 years' time. One of the topics here at this conference has been carbon dioxide removal and, what is going to sustain those markets. But we all see that in the long term, carbon removal has to happen. It's called for by the IPCC. As soon as 2040, we'll need to be removing 5 to 10 gigatons of CO2 a year. I mean, that's a daunting number, but we are working on the technologies to get there. And we can imagine that the markets will get huge, but it may take 10, 15 years to get there. And so staying the course, that's my message.
It's a great message. Thank you. Thank you. I am going to really close it now because the next session has to begin. I had somebody come to my office with an investment proposal. He said he'd run the scenario that we've been talking about, and he said the world was going to be submerged with water, and he was buying the rights to the peaks all around the world, and he was offering me a chance to invest in the peaks for a place for me and my family in the peaks. I said no, of course, because I'd rather fight for what we've got and go down with the rest of us than end up in a peak with this guy. So,
Exactly.
are you joking? I'm never doing that. But so what I would rather we did was what we're really good at when we work together, which is we know we can strike agreements between ourselves to do the things that are sensible. Maybe we haven't felt enough pain yet, but when that pain is there, we do strike the agreements and we do figure out how to work together. We know we can take solutions from one part of the world and give it to another part of the world if we choose to. And when we choose to, we don't seek to make as much money as we might if we didn't have to make that transfer. We're completely capable of doing that. We know that everything we need to solve the issues we've got are within our grasp.
Exactly.
There is a fundamental change required inside, of course, so that we make these choices, and that requires us to be a little bit more at peace with each other and with ourselves, and to feel like we're all part of the same problem and the same solution. And so it's completely doable, and I think that's what we've heard on this stage, and this is what this group of leaders are dedicated to do in their lives. And I want to thank you for patiently listening to this wonderful group. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.